would just like to say welcome to all of you. Thank you all for coming. We're recording the lecture for to be published on the GTH School of Architecture YouTube channel further on. That's why you see me talking to this ridiculous set of double microphones. But now we're here, and before I introduce tonight's speaker, I would just like to say that last time we gathered here, we listened to a presentation of the design of the new school at the KTH campus, and we've asked Dorte Mandrup to share some thoughts of her work also on architecture of learning, or architecture for education. So hopefully we can consider this a little bit of a continued conversation on the relationship between architecture and pedagogy. And we'll return to that subject further on also in coming lectures after the summer. But without further ado, let's welcome Dorte Mandrup, Danish architect. She has run her own practice for a while, and before starting her own practice, she was employed by Henning Larsen. Architecture of learning for all ages has been sort of a continued interest of your practice already from the start. And you also have a little bit of a connection to Stockholm at the moment with the competition for Tekniska Nämndhuset, the administrative building for the Stockholm Municipality and Transportation Urban Planning Office. It's our Director of Undergraduate and Master Studies, Jesus Aspesito, who invited you here. Okay, so please, the floor is yours.
I'm very happy to be here. I love Stockholm. So every time I get a chance to get here, even though it's just for an hour or two, I'll say yes. So my office is in Copenhagen, and I work in Sweden, the southern Sweden. Actually, 50% of what we do right now is in the Skåne area, in Malmö, and also we work a little bit in Norway and Germany. We try to get out of Denmark as much as possible, since it's a very small country and we don't have that much work, and there's a lot of architects there. So. But this is where the office is situated, and a lot of the first work we did is also situated around Copenhagen and in the suburbs of Copenhagen. So most of what you're going to see here, except one project which is in Sweden, is from Copenhagen, and it's all most of it is also built work. This is one of the first projects we did. It's a daycare institution, and the interest in the office for children and for education and learning has also a lot to do with kind of the basics of architecture. It's also to do with trying to create space that will somehow facilitate different ways of behavior. And of course you need not only to move, but also to be silent and to be reflective and so forth. So we're not kind of promoting movement as the only way of doing architecture, but it's part of doing architecture for children is to challenge and to make them make it possible to move in between whatever you're doing. So this first daycare second daycare institution we did, mainly the daycare institutions in Copenhagen 10 years ago, 15 years ago, was kind of done by the authorities with their kind of local architects, and there wasn't paid that much attention to daycare institutions because they needed to be cheap and they needed to build them fast. And there's this guarantee of the municipality that they will give you a daycare placement in a daycare institution before the child is 1 year old. So sometimes they have to do it very fast as well. This site is in Østerbro, which is a kind of mixed area, a part of the Copenhagen areas. And this area was kind of very dense. And there was this problem that the neighbors were not so happy with the a 5-story institution in front of ending the. There was this carré or this block, and if you wanted to kind of fulfill the block, you would build in 5 stories, but that meant that the neighbors would get no sun in their backyard. So they were complaining, and then you could have only an institution in one story in this 5-story block. The site was contaminated, and also there were some regulations, fire regulations, because it was so dense. We could not have any windows towards the neighbors or the backyard of the block. And as you see here, this is the situation. You have this very, very dense 5-story block, and then you have the site. And if you want to have sun coming into the backyard of the block, you need to not to build so high. So that was the kind of main concern, and that's why we were asked, was because this was a difficult site. They would ask real architects to try to build it. Otherwise, somebody else could do it a lot cheaper and a lot faster, I think. So this is kind of part of the basic studies that we always do, which is kind of the sun shadow study. But this was particularly important for this site. Then, of course, with the contamination of the site, there was a gas station there before. You would have to put a lot of money into cleaning up the site. If you wanted to clean the dirt totally, for it to be able to have children on top, you need to clean it very thoroughly, and it cost a lot of money. So what we did was to seal off the contamination and not get in touch with the underground. So it was part of the idea was to put out this surface and not touch the contamination. So with the maximum 1 floor, we did not have much space for outdoor area, and also again this the sun and light conditions for the backyard and also for the children's institution was very important. So since the program was big for 3 group rooms, it was taking up all the site area in 1 floor. So we needed to put the outdoor areas, which needs to be the same on top of the roof, and then in order to get light into the building, we did this cutout or different cutouts to get courtyards and outdoor areas on the terrain, but also get the daily sun into the institution, and then trying to create this natural connection between the terrain and the first floor and the outdoor play area was of course very important. So folding down this ramp could connect in a different way, in a more like a slope or a natural slope directly to the playground on top. And this is how the first. This is before renders. This is this kind of primitive, but we thought that was kind of advanced at the time. But that was basically how the institution was built, which is the roof play area and the ramp together, and trying to create as much activity as possible on every kind of inch that we had. So this ramp was laid out as a play area with beanbags, so you couldn't fall or hurt yourself, but also with umbrellas in the beanbags, so you can also use it for more quiet activities. And basically, you could always kind of get up and down in a more natural way. Actually, one of the things that's very important, besides children having problem with weight and with developing muscular strength and so forth, it's also, of course, very important that you keep the children in a kind of possible movement, so you can also learn. I mean, you cannot learn if you cannot move, which is part of common knowledge now, I think. So what happened when they measured these children, they're only 1 year to 3 year old, was that they were actually doing a lot better than the children in the institution next door, which is kind of only a one-story institution. That's kind of an interesting knowledge, because this is what you always would do, is to make institutions in a one-floor setting, because it's easier and you can have this overview and you can get in and out. But this is actually working very well for the children, and they develop quite well. So here it is, quite a strange setting, you could say, with this bare gables and the unfinished block. So in that sense, we thought we could not anyway fit in to the area. So being this spaceship was somehow okay. By lifting up the ramp, we could get extra area underneath for unclimatized activities. And the idea was actually to have swings hung from the ceiling in here, but they ended up using it as a storage space. And here it is. So you have the roof, the play area on the roof, and then you have this ramp, as you can see, is quite popular with the sand and running up and down here. What actually happened at this institution, which is kind of strange but also very Danish, is that after 5 years of using this, and everybody was happy, and the children were developing very well and so forth, there was a new leader of the institution that, and somehow things changed. And after a while, there was this complaint to them, not because it was dangerous for the children, but because this was dangerous for the teachers. This ramp of a 30-degree angle was straining for the ankles of the teachers when they were picking up the children on the ramp. So what they did was to change the whole ramp. We were asked to do it, actually, but we changed the whole ramp to be a staircase, so the teachers could pick up the children without straining their ankles, which is kind of a dilemma or a discussion that's, I think, very important when you do things for children, is that the whole idea of having an institution somehow becomes a more discussion of being effective and having as little teachers as possible, because it's expensive, which means that the teachers are so strained by the daily work that they will kind of go for any kind of ineffectivity in the buildings. And so these discussions we have quite a lot when we do buildings for children and youth, is that what is the balance between effectivity and the needs somehow of the children. So here's the beanbags that are kind of fixed to the ramp. So and they're placed very thoroughly, so you can never kind of fall further than 2 meters, and then you run into a beanbag. And it's also fun to do it by purpose, of course. So and also protecting, of course, the children from the street, so they're not exposed kind of for everybody walking by. So we kind of blinded the windows a little bit. This is the building that we finished quite a few years ago. It's a restoration and also a conversion of Arne Jacobsen's quite famous school from '56. And it's placed in this mixed neighborhood, but mainly with villas, and it's very suburban, you could say. When Arne Jacobsen, well, this is the picture of the school when it was finished in '56, and when he did the school, it was really revolutionary in the Danish school history, you could say, because it's only the scale of this school is quite different from every other school that would be known at the time, because you have only a one-story. It's more like villas or more like small homes that you put together, and every little home has its own garden that it shares with the next little home. So bringing down the scale and somehow making school a homey place was a whole new way of thinking, and also of course the very effective structure that you have with all the specialized rooms out here, and all the hallways connecting only in this direction. And Arne Jacobsen was so rigid that he would have all the hallways only have doors to one side, so you can get out to the left-hand side, but not to the right-hand side. So everything was kind of very orderly and very effective, but also very humane. With this very beautiful and very nice scale. This is a famous section, and as you can see, it's structural in a way you can continue the school forever if you wanted to. So this is half a schoolyard, and this is the classroom where you get directly out into this small courtyard that is private and shared with the next class, and you get all the daylight in, and still you have this very low scale and very beautiful connection to the courtyard. And this is the common schoolyard, also in 56, as you see. There's not much activity, and actually when we came in to do this work, we wanted to change this a little bit, but since it's a listed building, we were not allowed to do that. So we brought it back to the 56 state within here. The big problem here was that the municipality wanted to change all the buildings in the whole municipality to fit to the new ways of learning, which is of course much more project-based and also going across borders from the different classes. So having this very strict structure and only having classrooms and specialized rooms were not the greatest because you could not send out like a group of children doing a project, or you could not work with different groups because you needed to have more spaces and smaller and bigger spaces to be able to do that. So the idea in I think it was in 2001, they hired a set of architects to try to change this sort of strict structure in the school. And what they did was to somehow kill Arne Jacobsen, maybe too much, by covering some of the courtyards and making diagonal movements through the school. And the discussion was very kind of heated in Denmark. And the cultural minister said, well, you can't do that. It's a listed building. You cannot change anything. So when we came into this project, they've been working on it for like 5 or 6 years, and everybody was very tired. So I think we had a good sitting there because it was sort of easy with this tired mob of people that been fighting and so forth. So what we started doing was just to look at the structure to see if we could do something without changing the main ideas of Arne Jacobsen's school, but by doing small changes, which was mainly the program, could rehabilitate the school and somehow be able to teach in the new ways of learning. So basically what we did was to take the after-school facility into the school, and by doing that, getting more space for everybody during the day. So and by changing small things like putting a small sliding door in between the classrooms, you could use these rooms together. Also when you did project work. And then we took the main thing was to bring in the MediaTek, the library, into the middle of in the heart of the school instead of in the back, so you could bring back life into the existing school. And then we very sort of quietly suggested that you could go underground, and by doing that, you were not touching Arne Jacobsen's work, but you could still somehow connect what was there. So you have these satellites out here, and by connecting them underground, you could get a much better flow in the school in this direction also. And by connecting the courtyards and taking Arne Jacobsen's doors only going left to the left side, also mirror them and go to the right side, you could actually get through the buildings in this direction, which you couldn't do before. So very sort of simple things to do, but I think it has changed the school a lot and the way you use it, because this big empty heart that you had before, this aula, is now very much in use, and the children also go there in the afternoon, or they go there in between classes, and you can do different stuff here, mainly finding media. Yeah. So the idea was with this listed building, was to touch Arne Jacobsen as as lightly as possible. So by using his detailing when you're above ground, and then as soon as you got underground, we regarded this kind of the terrain as being the border between the listed and the non-listed building. And by twisting these courtyards down, or this is the detailing above ground, and then it's the same proportion as the Arne Jacobsen courtyard, but then by twisting it, when you get down, you get a much more fluent open space underneath here that you could use for different project work. So it was kind of making a supplement to the existing school and the structure up here to make a much more fluent and open space, which is more like a laboratory that everybody can use, and you're connected by the hallways. All the hallways are connected to this space, and you could use it as a supplement and also as a teaching space down there, and which is much more about restoring. We also added the specialized spaces, physics and chemistry, and the school kitchen, and some PE, some physical education, dance, and weight room that all needed a lot of installation, which is not so great for 56 very sort of subtle detailing. So by doing that down here, we could save the old specialized spaces from having ducts and ventilation system and so forth put in. And here you have this. This is the kind of a famous section in the hallways that you have this this release and tension and release theme where you are really kind of compressed, and then it opens up towards the courtyard, and also the ceiling is kind of opening up. It is very sort of dramatic somehow to move along these hallways, and the idea was to make a feeling when you get underground, that instead of having the feeling of getting underground, you would feel that you were kind of released and more going upwards to the sky than going down into the basement. So that was the main design idea, in the feeling of moving along these hallways and getting down to the basement. Of course, the teachers and the children and the parents especially were very concerned about having to teach in a basement underground, and how would that feel. So we did a lot of studies, and mainly when we work, we do a lot of studies in physical model, which is a lot easier than it's not a lot easier to judge scale-wise, and also it's a lot easier to see the kind of conditions all around when you do physical models. So we do that a lot, and then we parallel do, of course, the 3D modeling. But this is a much easier way to work, is to work with the physical model. But studying, of course, when you have 1.5 meter above ground, it's very important how this rim is experienced, and if you should have the feeling of being with a very crisp surface up here, so you don't feel compressed. And here's the physical model. It's been studied at the School of Architecture in Copenhagen. It has this light laboratory where you have a sun in a scale of something, and this endless horizon. You can actually make measurements, analog measurements of light in your model, and they're very precise. So we could adjust the openings and the surfaces down here according to the studies that we did in this analog model, which is also a lot more precise and more real than doing it in a 3D model. I think because you get everything as it is. Digging down and protecting, of course, the existing school. This is a very expensive thing to do, so it's not a great thing to do if you don't have a listed building or sort of a special problem to solve. So this is not the budget you would have for a normal school in Denmark. It's a special budget for a special school. This is the aula of Arne Jacobsen that we applied with this super furniture to be able to facilitate the library or the mediatheek and still keep the main ideas of the Arne Jacobsen building by not touching the walls, by not working on any of the surfaces. You could imagine that you could take this away and you would still have the 56 work of Arne Jacobsen. So it's kind of a humble way of working inside the existing buildings. Of course, there's a lot of energy work too. We had to change from single pane to double pane and all that, which is most of the money kind of went into these kind of restoration projects that you cannot see, or hopefully cannot see, because all these profiles are changed with steel reinforced profiling, but with the same geometry as the old. And Arne Jacobsen worked, when he worked with children, he somehow had this, I think, very sympathetic childishness, you could say. He worked with really kind of bright colors, and there's a lot of humor in a lot of the things that he did. If you see the walls of this building, you have all these holes that the light are coming out from this kind of bubbly surface, and this carpet was actually is the original color of a green carpet. They took it away after a few years, but we reinstalled it, and then we used the Arne Jacobsen color scheme with some supplements of colors. So this is kind of an original scheme. It's not what we suggested here. But of course, this piece of furniture, this is Arne Jacobsen's chairs from the time he did it only for Munkegaardskolen. He did them in 4 different sizes, and there were tables in 4 different sizes, which is also a very sort of interesting thing to do, to design a whole new set of furniture for this school. You would never kind of suggest that today because it's far too expensive, but there was this, in the 50s, this belief that school systems were the most important thing that you could work with and you could invest in, and that the education system, the public education system, was of the greatest importance. And you can see it from all the schools of the 50s that you have this wonderful quality and wonderful care, and a lot of investment and money put into making it the kind of best. And I think we should definitely try to do that again instead of making these kind of cheap solutions. Anyway, so again, trying to get as much out of the space as possible, but also be able to create the different atmosphere or settings for the children. We wanted to create these more intimate spaces. When you're in the library, you want to be able to be by yourself, or you want to be in a group with your teacher or somebody who's reading for you, whatever. So we tried to create these spaces. At the same time, we had to take care of Arne Jacobsen's this large facade and the feeling of the large facade, the double height facade. So we made this into this kind of Harry Potter furniture. So you could still have the feeling of the opening towards the courtyard, and also, of course, the furniture can be used as an auditorium. So his old stage can be used. It's only once or twice a year, but still. And also taking care of the light conditions underneath using this load-bearing plastic, so it's not a scary place to be. It's kind of a nice and lit place underneath. This is the old school, and this is the beautiful designed staircase of Arne Jacobsen with this very kind of dark floor. And this is also the old wall, the old colors. And there were no toilets inside, which I think somehow is a nice thing, because then you have this excuse of going outside in the middle of the class when you get bored, or if you can't, you need to move. You can ask to go into the courtyard, and nobody can deny you that. But the teachers and the parents especially wanted to have toilets inside, so we had to dig these new toilets underneath the old building to provide toilets on the inside, so nobody had to go to the courtyard and spend a lot of time there. And somehow to make this a nice place to be, I think everybody remembers being locked into a toilet and be put up to us in a wet sink or something of the older students in the school. So we made the space a co-ed, both for boys and girls, and also you can always escape. There's 2 routes out, so which is kind of a small thing, but it's also an important thing that you feel safe everywhere you are, and you're not, when you're in the basement toilet, you can always escape. And this is an Arne Jacobsen wallpaper that we rechanged and resized and rescaled and used as floor and wall paper. So here's the courtyard with the kind of quiet detailing here and the same proportions, and then you move downwards and you'll have a different spatial feeling here. This is more the restoration. Everything was brought back to the old colors and so forth. It's not so much to do with education. The lamps, the Munkegårds lamp that is now in production, that was produced for this school as well, and the old glass roofs and so forth. So when you move downwards, these four courtyards have a theme, you could say, because they're related to the specialized spaces down there, or the laboratories, but you can use them as experimental spaces or just to get air. But you get out of these doors, and they're kind of used mainly in the physical and biology workshops for different experiments and so forth. And getting down underneath is kind of like or should be kind of a bright feeling. You should not feel that you're in a basement. So we used white mainly to reflect as much light as possible. And also we spend a lot of time doing the acoustic, which is both on the walls and on the ceiling. So you have, not like here, you have an acoustic that's kind of comfortable because it's part of the more sort of physical things with schools, is that there's so much noise and everybody gets stressed up, you could say. So trying to take care of the acoustics is a very sort of basic thing when you do educational buildings. And the main structure and the secondary structure for the courtyards, and the relationship to the older buildings, and the connection to the old hallways that can be used as a small auditorium and is used sort of to lecture, to do small instructions, and then you could do your project work in the larger spaces. So here you have this kind of educational scene where you have instruction here in physics, and then you do the project work outside, and you can decide where you want to go, and if you want to sit, or you want to lie down, or if you want to go somewhere else. So it's part of the way of teaching. So mainly it's just one big open space with furniture that you can move around, but it's still kind of big enough to make spots or spaces within the big space. And I think that's another thing that's somehow important, is that not everything is movable, or that you have fixture points within the space, so you also feel safe. You don't have to lean against the wall to find a place where you can actually rest or sit down. So we try to make these furniture always as big as possible and as kind of quiet, you could say, or not too whimsy, because you somehow in these larger spaces need to have places to rest where you could feel at home. This is the laboratory feeling. Even though it's very white, it looks kind of sterile. You can wash the floors with a water hose, and you have all these ducts along the wall, so you can actually do experiments. It's not supposed to be this kind of white and clean place. The common kitchen, it's not like here in Sweden. I think you have this great relationship to food, and you have a very nice relationship to lunch. Everybody goes and eat a hot lunch during the day, and in Denmark we have this we have these small little packets that you bring from home, and you would eat it somewhere, and it will smell all over, and it's not really civilized. But we have this discussion, should we have school food, and it's not really done yet. So what we did here was to do this common kitchen that everybody could go down and cook if they want to, but you can also use it in the education. When you have project work on South America, you can go here and make empanadas and so forth. And so yeah, it's part of the open space. Whatever. It's Chilean, right? Yeah. And here you have, yeah, just some work and some don't, you could say. Yeah. This is another educational building, but also an after-school facility, and it's also a sports hall, and it's kind of a mixed-use building on a very difficult site in a suburban context with villas and somehow this is a lot about scale and bringing down scale from this big sports hall in one end and to the children in the other end. And it's about creating intimate spaces and also to make a space where you could move around and feel at home, so you're not kind of surveyed or people can't see you everywhere. So it's kind of there's all these kind of enclosed spaces where you could hide or you could do stuff that the grown-ups don't know or the adults don't know about. But this is kind of a railroad situation, and you have a very noisy road here. So we needed also to create spaces where we had not so much noise, or we were protected against the noise. So making these spaces outside here was very important. Otherwise, we had to build a wall here, which was not a very nice idea. But here we have to have a wall because the noise is so great. So this is kind of the sports hall broken down into these three long buildings, and then they kind of they break and they open up and they come down into scale when you go to the children's end here. Here you also have youth and a youth club in the afternoon, different workshops, and then you have the sports hall, and you use it together in the daytime, and sometimes in the evening you use it separately. So lots of different uses and lots of different children. It's also a very big institution with children from 5 schools in the area. So the idea was to make all these smaller houses and smaller spaces in connection with the outside spaces as much as possible, and then to make this central heart space where you always have the possibility of meeting a grown-up if you needed to talk to a grown-up. You know, they will always be here, but then you can kind of sift off through these different staircases up to different spaces on the top floor and also over here. So it's kind of a maze somehow, but very soon the children learn how to use it, and they feel very much at home. Here you have the top floor, and every room is always in connection to another room. So here you have this kind of double height space, so you're always in connection to the next one here, so you don't feel secluded. And here you have a dance studio in connection with the sports hall, and some different wellness studios and so forth. IT cafe in connection with the kitchen. And this is how it looks like. Kind of monster in this villa. It's not really liked. I must admit it. the people in the neighborhood thinks it's a strange animal, but and it might be, but it creates spaces that is kind of small scale, and also it scales down the whole building. Yes, the sports hall, quite traditional. Daylight is of course important, and also a difficult thing to attain, because most of the sports freaks will not have daylight in there because they think it's going to be blinding, but it's not if you diffuse it enough, of course. And here's the kind of downscaled end of the. It's more like a small village. And smaller outdoor spaces. Wardrobe. And this is the heart space in the middle, where you have this connection to all the spaces and can always get down. You always get down to the heart space from all the other spaces. And the kitchen. When we do buildings for children and youth, we always make these kind of smaller spaces where you could withdraw, because this kind of Scandinavian institutionalizing of children is somehow very stressful, you could say, because you're always together with somebody and you're always somehow controlled. So making these possibilities of escaping and being together with your best friend or not being controlled by anybody is an important part of when we do buildings for children. This is the children's culture house that we did in outside Copenhagen in a very run-down neighborhood. The municipality has these kind of neighborhood lifts where they put money into a special area, and then they make this decentralized government, you could say, of the areas, and they decide what to use the money for. And this area, Amagerbro, decided to use quite a lot of money on this area called the Culture Point. This was an old small culture house. This is just some institutions that doesn't have to do with this. You have a small theater, and you have a rock concert place, Amagerbro, and by connecting that with a new plaza, and by kind of restoring this place, they suddenly got a new cultural place in town. And then they wanted to have the world's first children's culture house, which is different from the institutions by its people come here, or the children come here to learn about art and culture, and by performing art and culture. And it's not like a place you go because your parents don't have time, or in the afternoon or something like that. You actually go here to learn, and you have professional artists to educate you. So it's a lot different from kind of an after-school facility where you're more you just have to have your to do something to make time pass. So this is kind of an active school for culture for children. Yeah.
Is it the city that runs it, or who runs it?
It is the city that runs it now, but actually there was this, of course, as there always is, these people that are burning and engaged and everything, and she had this small private place with children where she only with 2 rooms for a long time, and she actually initiated this whole thing with the municipality, but also with some foundations. So the building is half founded by the Lower Foundation, which is an important foundation in Denmark, which is the money from the lotto goes into this foundation, and they spent a lot of money on changing the sports facilities from being competitive to being for everybody, and to push the borders on how we perceive doing sports. So they've been mainly doing that, but they also paid for half of this building. So it's been a long time on its way. It's been 7 years on its way from the first sketch, and it opened here last year. But the main idea is also because the site was so small. We only had this very small site that you can see here. And you have a building in 2.5 story here and 6 stories over here, and we somehow needed to explore all the square meters that we could explore here, without kind of jeopardizing these small buildings. So the main idea here was to use all the space that we could, but still taking care of the neighbors, of course, by pushing down. So we connected just the gables and pushed down to make the afternoon sun come into the neighboring backyard here, which is the main spatial idea. And then, of course, trying to make this quite small house as compact as possible to inspire the different activities going on, let them inspire each other so you could see what's going on, and that the children could somehow see what was going on from from the entrance space and somehow get inspired was also a very important idea. We did this workshop with an artist and the children, and we did several workshops to try to understand how this house should be connected and how it should be, the disposition of the house was mainly done with these workshops where the children would work directly with the cardboard and so forth, doing models, but also explain a lot about what the feeling of space and how would they feel comfortable. And so we broke it down into these more sort of natural themes about the openness or the beach and the possibility of being able to overview everything, of the cave and the small spaces where you could feel safe. And so forth, which is basically a children's thing in this house, but it's also something that you could discuss, of course, if you do educational buildings or buildings for adults, because this kind of basic feeling of architecture and space. So this is also some of the ideas and the talks that we had with the children about being able to sit down wherever you wanted to, and being able to of course, to connect, but also being able to move around. So the main structure in the house is this movement where you could always move somewhere else if you want to, but you could also rest and you can also contemplate. So this is the main staircase on the mountain, which is the larger part of the house, the 6-story part of the house, which is connected with this big staircase that's also supposed to be a gallery or place where you can exhibit your work, and you have this connection to all the studios that are enclosed, but they're also interconnected visually. And underneath this big moving staircase, you have all these smaller spaces where you can hide, and there's a small library and small spaces, so forth. Yep. Another thing was a performing space. We call it the space of possibility, which is more like this space where you by using different furniture can move. It's big enough for you to dance and to do performances. So it's mainly a performance space, but you can change the space, and they use it for all kinds of stuff down there. There was not money for that. That's a roof garden. And section. Of course, getting daylight into the workshops, but also having connections. Getting as much space as possible by digging down. This is not there, but this is the kind of space of possibility where you get some daylight in it, but you also get enough height, ceiling height for doing stuff. The physical model is quite complicated, as you could see, the geometry. And the drawings, so the site is no bigger than this. And then you only have the site around here. So we have this very, very small garden that's kind of sunken down and protected from the street. And the plaza or the beach where you enter, it's only 1 story high, but you could still see what's going on in the whole house. And this is the render. Yeah, where you enter here, you could enter upstairs to the cafe, and you can see what's going up there. You can go down to the performing space. You can still enter also the big workshop here, the multi-purpose workshop, and all the specialized workshops on the mountain. And here it is. When we did this, the energy requirements changed a lot. So we started up with having this very open house with this garden on top. But the since we needed to close off the house a lot more to fulfill the new energy requirements, we kind of changed the whole skin, and I'm quite happy that we did that, because it means that you have this kind of feeling of being protected in a different way than with these glass walls that we used in the beginning. So it was kind of a luck thing. And so we decided to work with these deep windows to be personalized, to have the possibility of being inhabited by the children. So if you wanted to kind of stay or live or refurbish a small space, you could have one for a while. So all the inner linings of these are changeable, so you can make your own little space between inside and outside. Of course, it's only the spaces that you can reach that is safe enough for you to reach. But it's part of the idea that they will be changing, and the eyes of the building will also change with the work of the children. And here's the beach, or the entrance area, which is open, and different things can happen here. And they would have maybe a gallery there, or exhibition, or so forth. Children come here from 1 year to 18, so you need to sort of fulfill the needs of also the teenagers, and I mean, and a 1 year old, it's a very different need for space. So we try to kind of supply all that. Oh, this is kind of exhibition. You can take these up, and you can use different appliances, and you can exhibit things on the stairs. But yeah, here's the cafe on top, and the theater space underneath. Making these smaller getaway spaces. Being able to draw on the wall is a nice, or being allowed to draw on the walls. And another hideout space. Connection between cafe and performance space. And this is the multi-purpose workshop. Maybe I should, this is a sports hall, but it also has to do with culture and movement, but maybe I should go through it a little bit faster, because I took it into this because it was part of the idea that you could just make spaces that were somehow created for movement, or the surfaces somehow would challenge you to move in a different way, instead of having these kind of horizontal or vertical movements. You would always have the diagonal movement and the connection between spaces. And this is it's a sports hall. It's on in the same area as the Children's Culture House. It's a competition we won a long time ago. And the idea was to create the biggest space that we could within the budget, and to make it open for changes, you could say. So you, in some years, you might want to rebuild the landscape, or to make more enclosed spaces, but you would have this kind of three-dimensional building site. So you have these very important gables that are sort of strong statements in the street that we wanted to somehow celebrate. And you have, of course, the sports hall, the measurements of the handball field that is so important here in Scandinavia. And then we just connected the gables and the sports hall to create this kind of really large open space that is more like a landscape than a kind of functional sports hall. And to be able to do that, we used polycarbonate because it was very inexpensive, and mainly because you could create a daylight situation inside here. So it has some good qualities also with robustness. It's very hard. You could throw a ball to it and it won't break. It's not so great with fire, but everything else is fine, and it's very cheap. So this is the main idea: is to create this landscape that you could move on, and you could have these different platforms where you can do different activities, but nothing is really set for specialized activity. It's much more open program, and of course you have this field here that was a requirement, and underneath the landscape you have the basic facilities of changing rooms and also enclosed spaces. And right now we're actually doing a project where we fold up the landscape even further up. We get some more enclosed spaces up here, but still with these open platforms. So somehow it does work, and we do have a three-dimensional building site here. Polycarbonate has also nice light qualities. And this is the main construction. It's just minimized as much as possible. And since the Chinese was using so much steel at the time, we had to redo the whole construction from a mainly steel construction to a kind of hybrid construction between wooden and steel construction to be able to afford it. So this is in the street is kind of a lamp or a kind of open space in the evening. Of course, the reflection of the green floor makes it very green. It also differs with the landscape. So this kind of fluctuation was very interesting to us at that time. Naturally ventilated with these automatically opened windows here, where you get the air, the heated air out in the top floor. Also creating as much space for the inner courtyards again. And here's the sports field. And these surfaces are really used. All children, I mean, at least if they're not teenagers, everything beneath a teenager would kind of run up. Like when you see a surface that's diagonal, you just need to run it. So it's a lot of activity. If mom and dad is playing or doing something here, you have the children doing something on the surfaces here. It's not a spectator seat, it's more like a hangout space. Or you could leave your stuff here. There's no lockers or anything in this space. Daylight. Yeah, sure.
How is the climate?
Inside?
Yeah.
These polycarbonate channel plates are actually insulating quite well, but not well enough if you want to heat it inside. So it's only heated up to 10 degrees, and the rest is kind of the sun heating or the solar heating. So they've never complained that it's been too cold there.
And not too hot either.
No, it's only like 1 or 2 degrees hotter than outside, because you have the geometry here is really it's very good for natural ventilation. You take in the air here, right, and then everything is, the hot air is kind of going up into the towers, and then it gets out. So I mean, if you had a different geometry, maybe it wouldn't work so well, but the geometry helps a lot. This is it's kind of a multi-purpose building too. It's also about movement. It's also about using the building on the inside and the outside. And it's a stack. It's a cultural house, but also has a sports field on top and a climbing wall, and also has a skating ramp. And it's all about stacking activity and connecting them, so you can use them together and separately. This is all about sustainability, so I won't go into that. It's a suburban place, and it's in a new kind of neighborhood. So making this this building, you know, so you could see it from everywhere would be kind of natural. It's also a common cultural building. So we wanted it to make as little footprint as possible to be connecting to the outdoors because the site was very small, and also be seen from far away. And then the building was created somehow to be also a sculpture that you could use for different activities. So yeah. So
how small is the footprint?
the footprint is the whole building is only 384 square meters. So the footprint is, I think, 60 square meters, something like that. But as you can see here, you have a connection. This space can be opened up to the outside with this kind of kiosk wall with gas patroner. And then you can enter here if you're handicapped, or if you want to take the elevator or the staircases, you can enter in the bottom floor. Otherwise, you can enter up here. So you could use these activities separately. So this house is kind of very compact with activity, instead of being only used for one thing. Sorry. And here you have the climbing wall here. You can use it with an instructor. So you have these ropes hanging from here, and this is skateboard ramp, which is very much in use. So somehow this this kind of indoor-outdoor use of the building. So it's not just a cladding or a skin from between inside and outside, but it's also part of the use, part of a landscape that you could use. So this is one of the activities is being the listener or being in a performance space. So you can have small performances going up here, and then you have a spectator's seat here. Connecting to multi-purpose space on top, which is more for different, can also be for parties and stuff like that. Detailing. And the basketball field, that's also used as a summer bar. So this is a children's institution in Rå in Sweden, outside Helsingborg. And it's on the beach, so the whole situation is very kind of tense, you could say. You have this beautiful old village, which is, I think, is turned into a very resourceful area where people like to live. You have the water out here and the beach, and on that beach you have this old school as the only kind of monolith building that is placed on the beach. You have these small fishing sheds also, but otherwise it's kind of the only big building on the beach. And there was actually an allowance to build a forskola in connection to this old school. And of course it's kind of a delicate situation to build in this kind of area where everybody would see this as a public beach and an open park. And how do you do that without feeling without having readiness? So I think that was a very important. I don't know actually what happened to these drawings. Can you see these drawings on the outside? Yeah. But the idea here is to somehow be as subtle as possible and be part of the landscape, so we don't take more than we give. And the main idea was to combine these fishing huts, fishing houses from the old village, which were all placed in a way so you could protect from the wind and protect from from the wind that comes from the west. So somehow making these huts hide into the landscape would be was part of the project. And also at this time it's also been a long time on its way. It was 2006, I think, we started the first sketches, and it's been through this whole overclocking system you have in Sweden, which is kind of a long, takes a long time. 2 times it was through the whole thing, and when we finally started to to build or to do the project drawings, the energy requirement has changed a lot, and also the expectations of the climate changes had changed. So from being 2.5 meters above the water, we needed to be 3 meters above the water, which was 0.5 meter that we had to take within the house because we couldn't go higher because the detail plan said so. And also the whole idea of having these kind of inner courtyards that were half a house here, we couldn't do because the energy requirements said that we couldn't have so much glass. So we took kind of a quick decision and covered the inner courtyards to make these kind of larger common spaces. But that was kind of part of that. But I think the Swedish way of doing daycare institutions or förskola is very what can you call it? It's somehow it's more you spend more time and more money on doing your daycare institutions, and I think you take more care and there's more space, and also there's this idea that the children is not just kind of stacked together in this as small a room as possible. You have these different workshops and so forth, and so there's a possibility of being outside your group and doing activities that are not kind of related exactly to the space that you're in. So I'm very much in favor of the Swedish förskola program, and also it seems to be a lot more tested than the Danish, which is much more about effectivity and building as little as possible, and using as little energy with the teachers. So I'm very impressed with this system actually, and seems that you also have more teachers than we do. So it's a luxury thing to build here. Anyway, so this is the main idea, or the main plan of this building was, the idea was that you could walk on the building, so we didn't take away any land from the rest of the city, but there was some concern that people would fall off the roof or it would be dangerous, even though we wanted to, of course, to have railings all over. And I was there the other day, and there were lots of children up there. Of course, they just climbed the fence, and they. So maybe it's more dangerous, not allowing than allowing and having a fence. But that was the basic idea, to be able to walk on top of the institution, also for the public. And now it's more enclosed, you could say. And this is kind of the night thing. You have the group rooms sort of surrounding these common spaces or workshops, ateliers, and then so you have these kind of more lower, denser spaces for more intimate spaces, and you have these bigger workshops that are. So you have the difference between the small spaces and the big spaces, high ceiling spaces. And the day situation. This is going to disappear, but we moved the landscape, of course, these 1.5 meter up, so you kind of cover part of the building, you could say, and make it somehow blur into the landscape. With this kind of abstract small houses within this abstract landscape. We covered it with this robinia, which is a Central European wood, which is a hardwood. It's as good as teak, but not as, but much more sustainable. It's kind of a small tree, so you can only get it in kind of small pieces. But it's really an interesting wood because you don't need to maintain it. It's extremely hard and extremely oily, so you can keep it for 30 years without doing anything to it. Yeah. Yeah, of course, I mean, climbing here, it's very easy. So and also dug down. The whole playground is dug down, so you have the landscape kind of further up here. And going to the entrance, you can go from each side, and then it's connected to the larger school. So you have the connection with the teachers and from the school and from the forskoler. Yeah. And then I guess it's very important when you do these kind of spaces for children that you make the frames that you can store all your stuff, that you could kind of clean the space and make it open, but also somehow furnish it so not everything is kind of mobile and pushed away, but that you have these spaces in between indoor and outdoor where you can actually sit or you can be there, and also that you have these kind of storage spaces. And this is the connection between the group rooms and the open spaces inside. So you have transparency, but still you have this kind of storage space in between. And then, of course, when you put in the children, it looks a lot different, which is great. So this kind of collage, you can almost say, that creating the frames and then it's filled up, but it's somehow controlled, or it's somehow has a purpose, a spatial purpose. Yeah. Like using the wardrobe, and again creating these smaller spaces where you could hide and be away from everybody else. Also being able to use all the spaces that you have to be economic somehow, that you take care of spaces to sit and kind of be, even though it's just a wardrobe. Oh, sorry. Boring, empty space, kind of filled up. Yeah, so I'm almost finished. This is more like a plaything. This is a tower in Aarhus. It's also about movement and somehow about public space, you could say. It's a platform in Aarhus. It's kind of a vartegn. I don't know how you call that in English, but it's kind of a mark on the new harbor in Aarhus. It was a competition that we did together with or against Big and 3XN and Smidhammer and Larsen, and the competition was making a tower that could only have this very, very small foundation here, because this is an old crane spore, and we could only place it here because there was a lot of other activities, and then the rest was kind of free. We couldn't go higher than some meters, and then the budget, of course, was fixed too. So the idea here is this is the placement, of course, to find this this way of making a public platform to view platform, but also to make the movement or the part of the movement on up to the platform part of the idea. So you don't just go up and then you look and then you go down, but that moving up there is part of the experience. So yeah, it's very it's kind of primitive, but this is the kind of boring idea of just going upwards and then having the view and going downwards. so we created this kind of balanced structure that you could still be in balance, but you could move in a natural way upwards, and you can use the movement also for a public platform or for diving into the harbor. So when you move upwards, yeah, it's part of the idea, and you can also use this as a as a view platform. Also, you need to be protected from the climate, of course. Denmark and Sweden is not the greatest climate all year round, so being there and still being protected, also from the sun sometimes. And it's somehow being able to construct this in a harbor way, so it's a steel structure that is kind of a piece of sheet steel that we weld in a factory for ships, and you can sail it into the site, and you can jump it down on this very small foundation. That is the basic idea, and of course these holes make the steel lighter upwards, so which the engineers now are doing a very sort of advanced calculation on, because it's both the balance and the structure, of course, but making it as light as possible by opening up towards the sky. Fall. And this is a nice thing, because this is the engineers that actually kind of got into the project so much, and sometimes you don't see that, but they've been really into it. So they made this mark. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions or comments from the audience? Yes.
Hello. I wonder if you have any reflections, or how you reflect upon the aging of the buildings during the design process.
Yes. The aging of the buildings, right? Yeah. I think, to be honest, I think when we started off the office almost 15 years ago, we were very much interested in this midlertidighed. I don't know how you would call that. Temporary, the temporary qualities of buildings. I mean, trying to make buildings non-monumental, and trying to make buildings sort of as lightweight as possible, because we felt that the buildings should somehow be able to also to change during time, and also that there was a poetic quality in trying to also to make the buildings age in a way. So maybe you change the sheets, or you would make a new facade, or so you have the feeling of time into the buildings. And I think that was kind of a main quality that we were looking for in the beginning. And also that's the polycarbonate and some of the very sort of lightweight materials. Also we used a lot of curtains and this kind of non-heavy materials, right? So it was mainly to get that quality that we work with these kind of materials, and we're still interested in that quality. But of course, there's also, especially with public buildings, there's this kind of use where you don't expect people to change it that much, right? And sometimes I think some of the buildings that we did, we revisit, and we kind of we can be, you can be sorry that it's been too changed, or that people don't use it sort of in a more sort of in a softer way. So I think now we are a little more not into robustness as heavy materials, but we might look into more to materials that are kind of not more classical, but that age in a different way, because this kind of changeability might not be as possible as we thought, because people don't change. They change it, but not in not in the way we expected it to be. So that's getting older, I guess. Yeah. But it's mainly about this temporary quality that we after.
I actually have a question that you complimented the Swedish kindergarten system, but at least in Stockholm, I would say that there's currently a sort of lack of investing in schools and kindergartens, at least in newly built areas, or when there's housing, there's like a shortage of. Nobody really takes responsibility for investing in social infrastructure, which is really what educational or health buildings are. How would you, as an architect, argue for sort of investing in quality on a planning stage?
There's a big lack in Scandinavia. I think we think that we invented, the school system, or that we invented this kind of progressive school, and we are kind of far behind from some of the experiments or some of the things that are happening around Europe, and I think there's maybe this kind of selvfilm, we would call it in Danish, but this kind of, we trust ourselves too much to think that our school system are so great, and so nobody really discusses that much, and I think the relationship between architecture and architects engaging in, how should our school system be, is kind of been, well, in Denmark at least, it's been into this kind of, and I've been one of them, I guess, kind of pushing that with lots of fun and colors, right? And then we're fine. But I think there's a lack of really deeper discussion on how the education system works, right? I mean, we can be architects and we can facilitate what's going on, but we don't really engage into the discussion of how should we educate our children, right? And you can see that in the way we built. It's kind of superficial somehow. It's like in Denmark right now, all the playgrounds has this red surface and lots of little bumps, and then and I think that's kind of that's a very I mean, it might be nice with little bumps and red surfaces, but there's no really there's no deeper pedagogical or there's no psychological explanation. It's kind of just for the fun of it, right? And I think that's I think we as architects should engage a lot more, but also you should have a much more focused discussion on how the education system could be the focus on the education system could be re-established, like in the 50s or in the 60s. I mean, even in the 60s, you had a lot of discussions, and also you had architecture to go with that. But it doesn't seem to be important as a political discussion, right? In Denmark, and I guess in Sweden too. And I think it's because we think that we're doing really good.
And I mean, what you get is, I mean, like maybe colorful, bumpy landscapes, but at the other end of the spectrum, you also get a huge quantity of just like container barracks stacked on top of each other, at least here, in like 5-year temporary planning permits. They're just dumped on the schoolyard whenever there's a need for expansion, and then you just stay there for forever, basically. There's just no planning ahead. And it's just really sad.
It is a political question, isn't it? I mean, it is a political question whether you think that you need to invest in education in public education from the first years, right? And I think that's it's a big issue. Yeah.
How would you describe the mindset for you as a designer or architect when designing for younger people or I mean, grown-ups in education too, compared to just a normal office workplace? I mean, because the kindergarten is the workplace of the kid, right? So how do you describe sort of your mindset in the two, or is there similarities or differences, or
in between?
a workplace for an office or a grown-up and for...
Basically, I think there's no difference in the way to perceive the program, and I think, I mean, of course, children, there might be, you facilitate kind of more movement because children do move more and they need to move more probably. But I think the kind of basics of architecture is somehow consistent, right? Also for grown-ups or adults, and I think when you do workplaces, there's the same kind of rules that you should consider, which is facilitating different psychological and bodily moods, and they go together. If you want to make a nice workplace, we're doing IKEA global meeting place right now, and I think being effective in one way and cheap, of course, also economic, but then sort of rethinking what is the needs when you really want to not just performing, but also if you want to go to work and you want to love it. What do you need? And one of the things that they talked a lot about was to make this kind of garden situation where you would work on the outdoor, not as a gimmick, but as part of the daily life, is that you would go out and you would work outside, or you would walk, or you would have meetings, or you would and I think that's somehow a very basic thing if you want people to feel good about their work, is to have this possibility of feeling the freedom of going out, but also, I mean, the physical thing about getting fresh air and walking and moving, and you work better, right? So this kind of, it's the same with children.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question regarding if working with those kind of projects you showed here today, even though I know you work with different projects, but if this has been a conscious choice, or if like one project have led to another, and if it has been a conscious choice, if why it has, if it's because of it's kind of a laboratory for playing with the spaces and playfulness, and that you have more like means to work with than say like an office building or a shopping mall or whatever.
Of course, it's much more fun to legalize this playfulness. When you work with children, people don't ask so much why. Why do you have to climb up and hide? And of course, it's part of it, like you say. It's part of the motivation is to be able to actually do a series of spaces that is much more kind of underlined, you could say, or the basics of the emotions of architecture is kind of more enhanced, or you can do that more enhanced. But I think also it's very much about you do the first and then you get the next one. So, but we are interested in. I mean, also we started studying. I mean, we didn't study a lot about it before we did the first one. But then, of course, you start studying because then you get interested, and then you, then you get some knowledge, and then you get, you get better. but it's not a conscious. I mean, yeah.
Short follow-up question. And do you think this has working with a lot of those kinds of projects, and when you do like a huge office building, which is an adult community, but which has common spaces like Tekniska Nämndhuset competition in Stockholm, do you think it has affected your mood of thinking, even for adults and the needs of adults, to have the same kind of various spaces and scale and niches to be secluded and so on?
I think it's basically it's a very core thing in what we do, is to work with this kind of the differentiation in spaces and in series of spaces, and the sort of diagonal connection and so forth. We also do that when we do housing, and I guess it's about what is it about? I don't know. No, it's about trying to get as much spatiality out of what you have, right? So it's instead of just making one box, if you have 30 square meters, what can you actually press out of this of spatial experiences? Yep.
Do you, like when you're working with spaces for kids, and as you mentioned, that there might not be conventions that you have to follow as in other creation of architecture, do you also, like, how do you, like, sort of critique your own work with that? Do you ask the kids, or also like, yeah, or also like try to get new ideas from the kids and maybe see how they misunderstand your spaces that you create, or do you learn a lot from the kids, like doing your work and bring it on to your next project?
It's a great idea, I think. I mean, to actually make a more organized asking the kids afterwards. And maybe that's arrogant. I mean, I don't think you really get the chance of doing that organized, but of course you could start a research project, and I think that's very interesting. Because you always ask the grown-ups, right? How is it going with the children? And they would say, oh, they're doing really well, or the grown-ups would, it would be the grown-ups or the adults' view on how they're doing. But mainly when you ask the children, they say, hey, I'm doing. I mean, somehow they adapt very easily, so they might also say that with a terrible building, right? So I think making an investigation into that would be, you would have to do that very scientifically, not just to get happy kids. But it's very interesting, I think. And you could also ask, is the municipalities around, I mean, in Denmark and Sweden, that are changing the schools and rebuilding them, are they actually doing any research afterwards? How did it work? Did we get more concentrated kids, or did the kids, it seems like there's not much research afterwards on anything in the school system.
So I gotta say, I found it real interesting what you mentioned about the slightly sloping angle really enhanced kids' like physical abilities quite early on, which was, yeah.
I mean, if you have a staircase, or if you can jump from somewhere to somewhere, that would happen, right? I mean, so these kind of very simple things you don't need to research on because it just happens. You can, or if you have a big space, they will run, or if you have a staircase, they will climb. So it's a, but I think like you say, how do you actually research on how does it work? Interesting, a good PhD project.
It reminds me of something I think I've heard you say before about the responsibility of an architect designing first impressions for people. So in a kindergarten, the door you design, or perhaps more the corridor you design, might be the first corridor they've ever experienced. And it might also be a reference for them spatially or in their memory for the rest of their lives. And do you know what I'm getting at? That's sort of how do you think around that very sort of acute situation?
I think that, I mean, maybe also relating to the other question is that there is a need for a discussion on that, right? I mean, because there is dilemma, or there is always a balance between safety and experience, or safety and challenge. Can you hurt yourself when you do things? But you can also have wonderful experiences by doing something dangerous. You can have a surface that's totally easy to clean, but you can also have a surface that's not, but is very you can smell the wood, or so there's always these kind of balances between effectivity and danger and experience, or sort of sensuous experiences with children that I think is more important than with grown-ups, because we're kind of shaped. But I mean, since there is a big responsibility in shaping children, and since we are having institutions and we use them a lot, this kind of responsibility should be discussed more, that we prioritize that. You know, that you should have a sensuous experience, that you could smell, or you could, and then you prioritize that above hygiene or safety, or, I mean, that you could really go into these more detailed discussions on how do we do it. It's not just about making red wobbly surfaces or a nice green color. It's also about the sensitivity that you enhance, or the experience that you kind of put into the memory of children for a long time, right? So, what did I conclude on that? We should discuss that more.
Okay, anyone else? No? Okay, then I think we'll say thank you once
Thank
again.
you for listening.